All right. So here we are. Looks like we're starting with mine. Yeah, this is the latest vulnerability with a logo and a website and a sexy name, Strandhog, which, anyway, this one is another Android phone. And at first it sounded pretty simple, but it's not. And I don't think there's a public proof of concept yet, because I'd really like to try this. You put on a malicious app on an Android phone, and then it can hijack the process of another app, like token theft on a Windows system. So when you click a link that's supposed to lead to some other app like Facebook, it's actually stolen by their app, which now asks for permission to do things. And now that app can do everything, steal your keystrokes, steal your photographs, whatever you give it permission to do. And the permission message appears to come from the other app. So anyway, they demonstrate people stealing everything off a phone with this, and they say it's under active exploitation from apps that are connected to apps in the Play Store. The apps in the Play Store were not directly infected, but they led to loaders which loaded this. And apparently Google has known for a long time and they have not patched it. So this sounds like great fun. And if they don't cancel it, I'll be teaching a mobile device hacking class next semester. We can try doing it, see how good it is. Sounds awesome. I would imagine Google will patch it. I wonder if somebody, it may be a fundamental flaw inside the OS that's hard to patch. I don't know.
Looks fun.
Right, because if it's known for a while,
yeah,
and they haven't done something about it, then yeah, maybe it is within the OS.
It reminds me of DILT hijacking, which does essentially the same thing on Windows systems and has never been patched in decades, because it's a fundamental property of the way the operating system works, that you can dynamically load runtime libraries, and that's intrinsically unsanitary and dangerous, but it's so valuable they do it anyway. Anyway.
So I'm looking at this. It's interesting. It looks like on the front end, the whole time the victim thinks that they're interacting with Facebook or whatever, and then on the back end, this redirects pretty much all the data once it's taken over the process. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I mean, your only clue would be that an app you use suddenly asks for more permissions, but I don't think that's unusual.
No,
right.
Constant.
I would think maybe if you're running local antivirus software, like Lookout, maybe it can catch it. I don't know. Android users should really be running local antivirus, but I imagine a lot of them don't.
Is there anything like Procmon for Androids where a user would be able to look at their...
See what's running?
Yeah.
There are a lot of, there's Task Killer is one of the ones you get. If you have an Android phone, you have to have a Task Manager app, because otherwise it drains your battery running junk in the background.
Wow.
So that's something you actually get used to, is checking all the apps that are running and killing them, at least when I did.
But I wonder if this would even show up if it's taking over a legitimate process. I wonder if it would even show up.
Right.
That's what I'm not sure. It might show up as another process, but I don't think there'd be any clue that it's taken something over. Although there are in principle ways to find that with like memory forensics. But you know, if I was working at one of those antivirus companies, I would see this as a challenge to detect this and stop it. And it seems like you could do it by just examining the processes in memory and seeing if they have stolen a token or something.
Oh, sure.
But they don't recommend any defense yet. So, you know, obviously I think it'll be a next thing. They ought to tell us what to do about this. There ought to be something you can do to protect yourself. But this is really new, so I guess we haven't got there yet.
Yeah.
Anyway, there'll be a lot more about that coming, I guess. So, Elizabeth, you've got how to stop people from tracking you. Boy, I'm dubious.
Yeah, well, I don't necessarily know that it's entirely going to fail safe, but this is an interesting piece that's a follow-up to the article that we did a couple weeks ago from Kashmir Hill. You actually had come speak to the classes. She published an article in the New York Times about this stuff, maybe a little over a month ago. And what's interesting is she brought up this company called Sift that builds third-party user profiles on consumers. And this is kind of playing off that article. Something that's interesting was when she published that original one, I started the process with the Sift company to see, what they had on me. And funny thing is I checked my email. I started that process on November 4th. Today is December 3rd. I'm still trying to get my data from them, and they've had all these insane requirements that I had to do, like provide a copy of my passport, for example.
So they just have more data.
One of the craziest things was they use this third-party verification service that requires you to take multiple pictures of your face, and it wants you to take it with different expressions. And to me, I'm like, okay, so you're just collecting this data set to sell to another third party to train their facial recognition AI. Great. But I went ahead and did it anyway because I figured all that's out there, and I'm in for a penny, in for a pound at this point. I still don't have my data from these people, even though I have jumped through all the hoops. So this is kind of interesting because it just kind of builds on that story and gives people some ways that they can kind of start looking into where all the places are that collect data on you that are at least available to consumers. So, you know, I think it's sort of a fighting a constant battle type of situation. And I think the headline maybe is a little bit misleading in that you can't ever stop it. But I think that you can definitely reduce the amount of info that's out there about you.
All right, I'm getting a funny chirping sound from Liz. Let me try turning off the VPN and see if that helps. Let me open this article.
I've been getting that noise too.
I hear something in the background.
Well, there's banging here. Maybe the chirping is what's echoing through your speakers and the banging. That's probably it.
Yeah.
The City College building is like 100 years old, and the pipes bang a lot. Anyway, all right. Well, I'll just carry on. Anyway, yeah, sounds pretty. I wonder if there's anything you can actually do about it. But I think the big thing is, of course, the privacy regulations like GDPR and the California Privacy Act. I think that's what might finally do something about this.
Well, it's that, and it's also a big part of it's the way that we're being trained as users just to hand everything over. So, I mean, I think that's another big part of it is don't just indiscriminately put this stuff out there about yourself. You know, they did a really good experiment where college students would sell out their friends' info for like a free slice of pizza, basically,
right.
Just as an experiment to show how willingly people will give over their personal info. So I think that's a big part of it. It's basic, but people forget that.
Yeah, fair enough. We got Mixcloud. Saw this one.
Yeah, Mixcloud, 21 million accounts breached. And the accounts are already up for sale on the dark web.
Well, you know, when I saw this, I thought 21 million, that's nothing. That doesn't even
right?
these days.
Right? So many breaches now. That's just...
I feel like, you know, I don't even get out of bed for less than $1 billion, you know.
Yeah. I saw the first thing I saw from this was the actual report out from Mixcloud saying, hey, we have a breach. And then this came out not too long ago.
I'm sort of interested in what the hash algorithm is.
Me too.
But they don't seem to say. They say strong hashed. Strong hash function.
Yeah.
SHA-256. These idiots think SHA-256 is strong. I thought so. This is ZDNet. I expect better from them. I mean, one round of SHA-256. I mean, my students use Python to crack through hundreds of rounds of MD5 followed by SHA-1. Who are you kidding with your SHA-256? Anyway.
Yeah, they thought a big number. They thought it would work. But anyway, yeah, it's on sale.
Yep. Okay.
I actually had a technical interview recently where the interviewer asked me if SHA-256 was secure and was surprised when I said no. Yeah. So apparently the news hasn't got out to everybody yet.
Yeah, you know, I had a technical interview, I think, with the same company, and I argued about 2 of the questions and convinced him he was wrong. Anyway, which I think should count as passing.
Yes.
I remember I took an astronomy course, and halfway through it was advanced astronomy, and only one teacher could teach it. And that teacher got a seat on the space shuttle, so he went on a diet to lose weight, so he collapsed and had a gallbladder attack or something. So he was gone.
Wow.
And so somebody else had to take over the class who didn't know anything, but the textbook was full of errors. And he took my listing of all the errors I found every week as sufficient evidence that I was learning the stuff. So anyway. Well, anyway, so let's see, there's that one. Then I got this one here. I really got my attention. This is just last month. I've heard people say that there's something seriously wrong with voting machines, but I didn't know it was this bad. Last month, they had an election in Pennsylvania, and one of the candidates was upset because they thought they were winning, but they only got 160 votes out of 55,000. So they called the people in charge of the machines and said, "Are usually the machines working?" And nobody would answer the phone. They couldn't reach anybody. So they said, "All right, I'm coming down there." And they found out it was complete garbage. They were winning. They had more than half the votes, and this thing was just throwing away all the votes, and they still don't know what happened. They haven't figured out why this happened. They just had to recount all the paper ballots. And there's a law, apparently, in Pennsylvania that for 20 days after the election, the machines have to be locked up and can't be examined. Whatever the point of that is, so they still don't know why it happened. And many people are disturbed. And, you know, especially with Moscow Mitch blocking election security reform to please the president who wants to pretend that everything's fine the way it is. It's, you know, apparently these machines are just as bad as Matt Blaze and all the experts have said. It is pretty disturbing. We really should be using paper for voting. Anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah, I heard rumors about this was wrong and that might be wrong, but I never heard of anything so outrageous happening.
I didn't realize that they were blocking security reform.
Oh, Mitch has been blocking it constantly until he became Moscow Mitch on Twitter, and then he relented and let a small reform through. The Democrats have been trying to push through funds for county governments, and the Republicans have been blocking it, of course, especially now that they're all in lockstep behind Trump. It's I got a book about that. Several books about it's a very interesting world we're moving into, where just lies and the truth are treated the same. It's a technique that seems to have started with Putin, although early versions of it started with Hitler, and now the whole Republican Party has gotten on board with just erasing the concept of truth, and it's working very well.
Yeah, well, and it's actually, I think that they've already been practicing this in various wars on foreign territories, because that's how they gain buy-in from the locals, essentially.
Yeah, I would like to think it can't work forever. I'm hoping that people will rise up. I know right now most Americans know that you can't believe anything you see in commercials. And I think they need to grow up and realize you can't believe anything you see on Facebook. But they haven't figured that out yet. And I'm hoping the 42% of Republicans do in fact figure that out, or perhaps they just have to die and the next generation will know. But I'm thinking in maybe about 30 years this won't work anymore. That would be nice. Anyway.
I don't know. That would be nice, but I'm less optimistic because, you know, also people believe what they hear on the news too, and I mean that's just as suspect at this point.
Unfortunately, it seems to be that way. Yes, I watched the mainstream news become a mirror image of what they oppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well. Anyway, down here we got corporate surveillance.
Yeah, so this is just a really good, it's long, but this is a really good piece on just all of the different ways that we're tracked by third-party companies. Yeah. And, you know, I don't imagine anybody is going to read through all of this, though it's a good read. But one of the, I think one of the most interesting aspects of reading through this for me was reading about the Open RTB protocol, which is a protocol that we don't necessarily know about.
Open RTB?
Yeah, Open RTB. If you go down to that part in the article, which is under part 3, real-time bidding basically explains the way that targeted ads work. And it's interesting because I've been taking this abnormal psychology class, And boy, have my ads gotten weird. I'm sure Google thinks that I have a whole host of psychiatric conditions that I don't actually have. And part of that's because I'll be researching coursework, and this OpenRTB is basically how those targeted ads appear, like for schizophrenia medication or whatever.
Oh.
So this is a whole protocol that's running under the hood on the backside, on the internet, because and it's fascinating. It's fascinating how this works, and I think that
Wireshark, does it come from your browser?
That's actually a great question. I haven't even tried doing that yet, but that would be a really good thing to look for.
Block it or modify it in Wireshark on the way out?
I think that you probably could detect it at least, because it's got like a whole library of like attributes and functions that it runs. So you could probably just use the search filters to find that stuff. Yeah. Now, I haven't tried doing any experimentation with it, but it would be interesting to manipulate it. And from the description in this article, I think you totally could.
That would be awesome.
At least from the pictures, it kind of looks like it's running with the web server.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That maybe you might be able to catch it from its cookie, but like you go to a website, and then the cookie and headers are taken, and then they're matched on their side, and then they fill the bid request, and it comes back to you.
But this is interesting, because I think I'm going to do the website security class again next semester, and it'd be good to see how this works, and maybe you can make a server that does something interesting or different with this to see it manipulated. I know there's an old scam. I met a guy at DEF CON years ago that was doing this, where you put in malicious cookies that cause other people's clicks to be credited to your account. This is a common way to make money, and it seems like you could play with that here too.
Yeah, because I think it signs everybody like a user ID, and then perhaps you could tamper. You could you could intercept that and change it.
Yeah, it sounds great.
But this is just a very interesting. It's a really interesting piece that they put together. Just basically enumerating all the different ways that you're tracked online by third-party companies, and I thought one of the other real interesting parts of this piece was where they talk about how they link your identifiers over time and use that to build like an aggregate profile on you. So just a really good read.
Yes, I'm very impressed. All right. Oh yeah, and we're out of IPv4 again. Yeah.
Yep. This is Europe.
Yep.
These guys cover Europe, West Asia, and the former USSR, headquartered in Amsterdam. They are out of IPv4s.
Yeah, well, I was a big advocate of IPv6, and I taught classes in it, and then after a while, nobody cared, and it's sort of like global warming or something. It turns out the general consensus is nobody cares, nobody's going to do anything about it. They're just going to keep buying used IPv4 and using them apparently forever. It's kind of funny. IPv6 is actually interesting and complicated, but nobody cares. It's like so many other issues. Anyway.
Yeah, so they're doing that same thing of, hey, people, switch to V6 because we're out of V4s. But,
well, the fact is, because of NAT, and people are now deploying carrier grade NAT, apparently they're willing to go ahead. I listened to Steve Gibson's podcast about Squirrel, which is his authentication system to replace usernames and passwords. And it is brilliant and wonderful, but the thing is, we already have password managers that are this ridiculous, clumsy way of solving that problem. And I think this better solution has missed its sell-by date. We've all settled for the inferior solution. I think everyone would rather have 2 or 3 layers of NAT and keep using V4 than go to V6, which would make more sense. This is, I think, a big issue. Like something wins, and once it's the standard, even something better can't replace it, not quickly.
Right.
So here's China introducing mandatory face scans. And one thing I heard about this is that I've heard people saying that China is now moving ahead. They've moved beyond just stealing technology from others. Now they're an innovator leading the world, which is logical to me. And they say one of their huge advantages is since there are no privacy laws, their AIs can get much more data to practice on, especially about face recognition, because they just force everybody to hand over your face all the time. Over here, somebody would complain, but over there, nobody can complain. And they are beginning to complain about this. But anyway, you have to have your face scanned everywhere. And I don't think they have much in the way of privacy controls in China. So anyway, they have no problem doing this.
It wasn't there an article about that that this same talk happening at our airports for both for citizens and non?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think supposedly it's not required. Principally, you can get another boarding pass, but I know on Facebook, like 8 years ago, started having friends tag the names of their friends in photos. So there's already a huge library of pictures of everybody, even if you don't consent at all to it. So in a way, it's kind of already happened, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Also, the thing that Urban was talking about, I think, was not just aside from the boarding pass thing, which I read elsewhere, they're actually putting up cameras that take pictures of all the travelers' faces that come through customs. And so it's not necessarily, basically it's taking crowd shots and then I believe it's taking crowd shots and then isolating your individual faces out of all of that. So it's not really an opt-in or opt-out thing.
Yeah, that's true, but they wouldn't necessarily correlate it with who you are, although I guess they know pretty well. And I know the selling point is that they can supposedly pick out the people that are on the do not fly list from a crowd shot.
I think it'd be pretty easy to correlate it with who you are because they have your photo already from your passport.
Yeah.
If they're only doing this with international travelers, and then they have lists of all the travelers that are coming through at that specific time. So that's a pretty narrow data set.
The other thing which is disturbing, I think, of course, is in China now, you don't even take a credit card. You pay for things with just your face.
Yeah.
So having extra copies of your face all over the place is the problem with all biometrics. Same problem with fingerprints. The problem with biometrics is you can't change them and you can't hide them. So they're not really as good as an ID card.
Yeah, and they've already shown that they can, you can fake out these facial recognition systems, sometimes with even like 2D photographs and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's, of course, I guess one answer would be to just make better biometrics that actually measure how you move and everything. That would be harder to fake, but I guess they could just video you, make a deep fake of it. I don't know. It's a moving.
So many little ways around.
Yep, like everything else. Anyway, so yeah, another one of these face app.
Yeah. So speaking of which, this was I thought this was an interesting story that just came out today from. The FBI was saying the space app is a nefarious security threat. And what's funny about this is funny on multiple layers to me because so essentially what this is, as I understand it, is it's an application that will basically show you that what you'll look like in a number of years. And it takes, like, say, for example, a photo of you from 10 years ago and a photo of you today, and then it does like progressive aging on it. Well, the joke going around, the hacker scene forever was that this was totally totally put out there by our government to train our AI. But the senator submitted it to the FBI and said, hey, I think this might be a privacy concern. Turns out that it's put out by like a Russian company. Mm-hmm. Funny thing is, Facebook's like, no, it's not a problem, even though all of our R&D team is located in Russia. Mm-hmm. What could be wrong with that? And it was interesting because, like, the response that the FBI sent back, in my opinion, was sort of a non-response, which was that any app that comes from a foreign country is a threat. I mean, I would roll in that any app that even originates in our country is still a threat to your privacy. But one of the things I thought was really interesting was a link to another article that was buried inside this one at the bottom, where it talks about Putin signing legislation recently. There's another article was yesterday about Putin signing legislation that essentially it sounds like he's trying to do just what China's doing, where they're firewalling off the internet, they're forcing search engines to delete certain results from being returned, and now he is insisting that any technology sold in Russia come with Russian applications.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've seen this movie before.
Well, I saw articles complaining about that, but when I saw the actual original report, it didn't have any details about what the apps are. So we're all just assuming that they're nasty surveillance apps, but we don't really know that.
That's correct. That's correct. But I think that we're right to be suspicious on that, especially considering the similar pattern that he's following to the China model.
Now, 42% of Americans are sure that Russia is our friend and they never do anything bad, and it is Ukraine. So it's perfectly fine as long as it doesn't come from a Ukrainian company like CrowdStrike.
Oh, good to know. Good to know.
Well, anyway, all right. Well, that's a brave new world. And I guess the last one is another leak SMS. I saw this one.
Another leak. Yep. From a company called TrueDialog. It works with over 900 cell phone operators and reaches more than 5 billion subscribers around the world.
But I remember when I looked through it, it seemed like it wouldn't be my SMSs. It was business marketing SMSs.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sound like it would be all that private anyway. But this is, of course, I think why a lot of people are reluctant to go to the cloud, because somebody will just put that on an unsecured Amazon bucket.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much anything you give a company is just going to be sprayed to the whole world, or so it seems.
Yeah, though, I mean, I'm not anymore. I'm really no more confident in companies that are still using on-prem for that, because
same reason.
Yeah.
They haven't secured things right.
Yeah.
Haven't configured things properly.
But I think Amazon created a bold new world of everything being wide open by making the default wide open. So a bunch of people who did know how to secure their on-prem became wide open when they went to the cloud.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like they had some idea of what they were doing before.
Yeah, a bunch of them
Right.
just take images of their stuff and put it in the cloud. And at least a few years ago, they would survey them. 80% of them said, oh, security, Amazon's taking care of that. And Amazon said, we absolutely are not taking care of that. It's your responsibility. And for years, nobody knew that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
So,
yeah. Oh,
yeah, so there's...
Oh, that's good, clean fun.
Yep.
Text passwords and base 64 encoded passwords. You know, Genymotion spanked me on social media because I installed the local Genymotion for Genymotion Cloud. And when you install it, it says your credentials have been saved in /username/profile. So when you open that file, your password is just sitting there in base 64. And so I put it on Twitter. I say, hey guys, and they said, you should have used our vulnerability disclosure process for ethical disclosure. And I'm like, oh, gee, I mean, when you just put the password out like that, it didn't even occur to me that there's any possibility anybody would care. Obviously, you don't care at all when you do something like that. And I bet they're not going to fix it either, because that would be, you know, I said, you know, I have disclosed hundreds of phones like this, and I have learned that nobody cares. When they do things like this, they just have no clue at all, and you're wasting your time telling them. We'll see. By the way, Genymotion is a wonderful product, but obviously security is not a concern.
Yeah, if a company is using base 64, I'm just going to assume they don't have a vuln disclosure process at all.
Yeah. I remember like 10 years ago, there was a guy that put on Twitter, they said, when you go to this website, it just makes you want to give up forever. There's 150 websites had SQL commands in the URL. You'd go to the shopping site and you'd see up here, select all products with toasters like this from this year to that. So you could just type SQL commands in the URL. It wasn't SQL injection. It was just direct SQL. This is like having just an open DOS command prompt as administrator on their server, or just a cardboard box saying, please leave some money in the box as you take stuff from the store. And I said, you know, I thought about it, you know, how would you even notify someone like that? They're obviously so clueless. They won't understand a word you say. I feel like, here's what you do. You go out in the street and find somebody with a black t-shirt and bring them into your room. And when they're done laughing, just pay them money to make this better, because you obviously have no clue at all what's going on. You should really just abandon all internet business entirely. But anyway, you know, I said, they're not going to respond to that. There's just no way to communicate with people that are that far behind, I think. Anyway.
But the insane thing is that a lot of these companies just don't care. I worked with a company that was getting robbed blind. Yeah. And I explained to them what was happening and why, and it was just like, well, we don't, we don't have a plan in place to fix that. And it's like, well, you could remedy it pretty easily, and you're losing thousands of dollars a day, hundreds of dollars a second. But it's crazy how management works at these places, and how these things just aren't a priority.
Well, to be fair, I was in fact talking about this last night in lecture. Management may have other priorities, like, for example, the modern Republican Party. Everyone is saying things they know is false. They know there's going to be a crisis later because of it, but it is the way to get through today. And often management has to just accept something terrible going on because there's something else more important to think about. Like, we just have to not have a scandal for the next month so we can finish this buyout. So just cover everything up and don't change anything, because that would admit we had a problem. However, often they just don't care at all. That's another thing. You have a lot of people who, which I think there's a lot of them in the management here, where they just don't even know or care whether the company is succeeding or failing. They're just trying to avoid any rocking the boat where they are, so they can just keep collecting their share and coast to retirement and not worry about the long-term consequences.
Exactly. And that's I think was a lot the situation that I encountered. I think part of that too is just like in the situation you were just talking about, people don't have any ownership over their product or their company, so then they don't really give a shit how it comes out.
Yes, and I think that's a big issue, and that's why I'd like to see everybody on board with the mission, and I was very surprised how much that is not true at colleges. There was another college I heard where the chancellor actually issued an edict to everyone saying, here's a new thought. The purpose of this college is to educate students. Say it with me. Let's make this our motto. Let's put this on the walls so everyone becomes aware of this. And I said, people aren't aware of that. And then I found out here a lot of people are totally not aware of that. That's not how they think at all.
No.
Well, that's an interesting issue.
Yeah.
Well, from a viewpoint of administration, the purpose of the college is essentially money laundering. It's getting money from the government for us to spend on administration, and the students and teachers are like just this irritating problem you ignore. There's another way to look at it. That's true at another level. Anyway.
Absolutely.
Anyway, it'd be nice if everybody was on board with the mission. It'd be a good way to design a business. Anyway, are there any more comments? All right, well, I'm going to stop recording if I can find my right button.